that could be done exceptionally bad, slow you down still, and you'd be worse off.
Yeah.
And if your aim was speed and cost savings, you could be slower and more expensive. That's highly probable, right? Because without the how, it could be all wrong. Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. This is Season 2, Episode 12. I am Jon Shanks.
And I'm Jay Keshur.
And I think we are going to be talking about cloud strategy.
Woohoo! What an
Jay,
exciting topic.
One of your top two topics?
Top 2 topics.
Yeah, love it. So, I guess before we get in, cloud strategy is a bit of a broad topic. Yeah, what do you actually mean when you say a cloud strategy?
Yeah, it is quite a weird, nebulous term. I guess in this context, what I'm going to talk about is people often get told to create a cloud strategy, or get asked whether or not they have one.
Right.
What is it? Who is it for? Why are they being asked? What behaviour can you drive from having one? They're the types of things we're hoping to discuss.
Right, okay, so somebody gets asked for a cloud strategy.
Yeah.
When somebody's asking for it, do you think what they're meaning is something to read through, or just like, have you got one? And you're like, yeah, I've got a cloud strategy.
Do you have an idea?
Yeah,
about what
I've
you're
got a
gonna
strategy.
do?
Yeah, don't
exactly.
worry about it.
Yeah.
It's fine. I've got this.
Well, then there's that trust, right? So that no one's going to trust just what you're saying, that you think you have it.
Yeah.
So you probably need to write it
Needs
down
to be
somewhere.
defined. So you're talking about then a physical document.
A physical thing, digital thing that you have, that you can point someone to.
That defines
what you're setting out, how you're setting out to use cloud.
And why? Because there's some assumptions here.
Yeah.
One, this sounds for like companies that are kind of older, not brand new companies. Because would you go off and define, if you're a startup or you just you're a new company that's highly probably born in the cloud?
Yeah.
Would you go off and define a cloud strategy up front?
You might actually, to be fair, because let's say you know that you're using cloud.
Yeah.
You might need a well articulated document that defines why you need to go to a second cloud, or because there's a cost to the business, and the strategy really is very similar to a business case in that it's articulating why it's important to the business.
Very waterfall.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's why I was just suggesting. It's like, meanwhile, people need to be delivering something while you're writing that strategy. Just let me know when you're doing this big document of yours, because we've got stuff to do.
I mean, it certainly skews to a type of organisation that needs it.
Yeah, exactly. That's more what I was teasing out. I can't imagine many young companies would. Like, they're probably sold on the cloud.
Exactly.
Well,
you probably don't, if you've got like some regulatory compliance thing of, hey, the PRA or someone is telling you need to go to multiple cloud vendors, then you probably don't need to write it down much. There's already a need, and you just have to figure out how to do it. And that's probably like an agile team, right? A team that is working, or an organisation that is working within a certain framework to deliver value quickly, to just go off and explore and figure it out as they go along. But I guess what I'm talking about is not every organisation has that advantage. They're not all have been created in the last, say, 5-10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's like ways of working, investment committees or whatever it is that they need to show to senior leadership to get buy-in, and the way that they might do that is through a document, presentations, meetings, to gain trust and then get money to do the thing.
So this is then more about a little bit around probably money, risk, impact to the business, change.
Exactly.
Like how much change is going to be. So this is more about you need to define a strategy because there's a lot of fallout maybe on what it could mean to the business in us choosing this direction, and therefore like actually what does it mean to us as a company if we are going to go to the cloud, because we operate this way, and you're suggesting it's not just going to be like take what you've got and it's the same, we're just going to relabel our on-prem to Amazon and keep it exactly as it is, and in fact the documents are one line, everything stays the same.
I mean you almost hit the nail on the head there. This is if you're on-prem already, there's already a culture, a way of working that's very associated to being on-prem, then you might need a cloud strategy because it's changing. Whereas if you're starting for the first time, then to be fair, for most organisations, they don't need to have the conversation whether they're going to go on-prem, start on-prem or cloud. It's just going to be so it's like funding, investment, or buying. So is it like, are you saying is a strategy encompassing a business plan, or is the strategy the business plan, as in like... I think they'll overlap quite a lot, because a business plan might tell you why you want to do something, what the benefit is to the business, but the cloud strategy will articulate a vision of where you want to be by the end of it, and what innovation that could drive, what the adoption plan is for projects, and then how the roadmap, what the roadmap looks like to get to that vision, to see that vision.
Cool. Not to distract from this interesting topic, but I've just realised that we're almost matching outfits, and I don't know if that was on purpose, Jay, or am I influencing your style? Is that what's going on there?
Actually, I never wear a collared
exactly, that's what I was a bit like, what is going on?
I mean, you could tell by my collars constantly being like turning up. I just need to get better clothes.
So sorry, back on track because that was a bit of a side track. But alright, so what is in this? So who would you think this is normally for? I guess anyone really from within the business, potentially. I'm guessing it should be readable by pretty much anybody, I'm presuming.
I mean, it's going to be written in English, so it should be.
But I mean, it's aimed for everyone in the organisation to orientate against, to like all understand what it means.
I'd say,
generally speaking,
like let's start from the first question, right? Why do you need a cloud strategy? If you're being asked to do it, why? Who's asked you to do it? Is there an issue in terms of you need to take senior leadership through a learning exercise as to why you would go to cloud, and this document is being used really for buy-in, or it's more kind of organisation wide, and this is your living, breathing strategy to constantly get organisational buy-in, and they're not mutually exclusive, because obviously the organisation has those leaders in it, but the leaders are obviously going to be the ones to fund the programme overall, or fund the strategy. So let's assume that we're using this for greater kind of organisational buy-in.
Okay, cool. All right, so it's for greater organisational buy-in, so it could have many stakeholders in that.
Yeah.
Primarily, either the CTO is driving it or delegated on behalf of the CTO to somebody to produce.
That's an interesting one. My gut is that organisations that are structured in that way, that have CTOs, might not necessarily need a cloud strategy because they're already very technology heavy, right? I'd see it almost as the ones that have kind of CIOs or CDIOs that have a technical element to how they're positioned. They're more likely to have come from a background where they're talking about not necessarily how to manage the tech, it's their asset is the information, and how to drive business value from that. Mm-hmm. So the title and how the organisation is structured is probably another giveaway in terms of whether or not the document is needed.
Yeah, so CIO, CTO, whoever owns the tech in the end, which could be multiple, you could have CTO and a CIO.
You could have a CDIO, right?
Yeah, exactly. But just for simplicity's case, we're assuming then that business services, there's already a footprint of something, and that something probably isn't in the cloud or is destined for the cloud because someone's deciding like we need a strategy for this is the direction we're going to go in, or wants to convince everybody that it's this direction we should go in, one or the other. Which then really means that the other stakeholders are the business owners of those services and the impact of those services, and some people might own the revenue for those services, maybe, who knows, and that isn't necessarily a technology individual, that's the line of business. So then the people need to understand and get buy-in from them, because they might be like, well, we don't want to move, we're fine where we are, thanks, the service works.
Does it work? Because
it does work actually. It works really well. Nice. It's working quite well.
But maybe there's things that you want to improve, like security or operational efficiency, resilience, etc. And that's part of the reason for potentially having a cloud strategy and moving to the cloud.
But I guess if we're prototyping a bit of a business, people don't like change. So even when things are bad, it's better the devil you know. And a lot of people tend to feel a bit like that. It's like, but I do know the on-prem. I mean, it's got its flaws.
But I know how much it costs. It's acceptable to the business.
Yeah, exactly. Like the security's known. Exactly. We've got approval. That was already painful for us to go live before. So people will resist, not deliberately because they're not bought in necessarily to the value, but just because things might have been historically quite problematic to even get to where they've got to. That the thought of going on yet another journey is just like, oh God, do we have to really do the cloud, honestly? So there's always going to be those resistance, because they don't necessarily. So this document's there to help them see the value of
maybe a bit of job protectionism, to be fair, as well, right? Because if you think about it, with cloud, unless you're picking up the way that you are operating on prem, you're going to have a bunch of roles that aren't necessarily needed, because you're not having people physically go into a data center and rack certain things and move wires from here to connect wires from here to another or whatever. So that will definitely be
there'll be nervousness, definitely, won't there? So is this document encompassing layoffs? Is that because how transparent is this strategy?
So I guess,
as advice for people, I mean.
With advice for people, you probably never want to go into the detail of layoffs. You want to outline a vision for what their roles and responsibilities could be. And training, exactly that. So how, what is the current skill set that we have in the team at the moment, and what do we need? How do we get there? What resources, what outside open source or public, YouTube videos or whatever can I watch to help me in that journey? That might be part of it. That's very low level detail.
It sounds like there needs to be some description, like an overview, framing, like an executive summary of some description, framing, like what the purpose of this document even is. Like why have I even begun a cloud strategy document? Which is going to cover the question we've probably asked, like who's it for, why, all this kind of stuff to frame. And then what would be next then?
I'd say the vision of what you're trying to achieve, not with this document, but with, if you adopted the cloud in the way that your strategy will set out, what will it enable to the business? Like, what is the overall outcome that you're striving for or enabling?
Right, okay. And so there'll be the vision, and the vision should be mapped into some value add,
absolutely,
presumably. So then, like metric goals, objectives.
So whenever you start any sort of major transformational thing, you probably need to have like checks and measures built into the thing that you're trying to build, right? So how are you going to, like, what actual metric have you got that you're trying to improve upon? How will you know if you're successful, so that it's not subjective? That's like in any term, in any project, program, anything that you're ever delivering. That's like such a basic way of I guess defining the value.
But then you still need what would you do? What would be the goals? Give examples then of what you would affiliate.
So
say you got the vision. What would a vision be? Would you say then?
Yeah, good question. So the vision might be, let's say you're an e-commerce company and your competitors are moving super quickly, and you've got a bit of risk in your business because if they carry on in the way that they are without you doing something about it, then you're going to quickly get displaced. So your vision might be to change that on its head. So you're the one that is being innovative and leaning on that side of things and using the technology that's out there in the cloud to create new revenue streams or be operationally efficient in the things that you're able to deliver, and then potentially customer value. So
they sound more like business, not cloud visions. That feels like a business. It is a business vision because a cloud is just a thing, a tool to get there. Really, it's not. But is your vision for cloud? So are you saying no, that the vision for cloud is also the same as the business? Because it's this strategy. Intertwined. They're intertwined, but wouldn't be like there's value to why you would do these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you could say like a vision for cloud would be the innovation, the accessibility of those services for that vision of the business.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah.
But they're kind of slightly different. One's recognising the vision of the business, the other one's just the vision of the business.
Vision, yeah. So you're probably right there. So I guess let's say the business overall has some things that they have want to achieve, and this is maybe a layer down into it, like how are we going to use cloud to achieve those things, which kind of makes the strategy a lot easier to write, right? Because now it's quite well defined in that it's only like someone's already set those things out. There's already buy-in that's the vision of the company.
Which is probable for most businesses, because they'll be like, I don't know, it could be that the share price has dropped or the revenue stagnated or whatever it is. Like there'll be pressure maybe from investors or maybe from people on the board that are like, why have we not hit the target for the year, or why have we stagnated growth, or why have we dropped share price, or why are we not entering new markets then if that's what we need to do. So that'll be the conversation probably happening at the very top.
I wonder though, because sometimes because people don't necessarily know, like those leaders might not necessarily be aware of all of the ways that technology could help, that there's a disconnect between what's possible to enable the business and then the business vision. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
that's what I was kind of getting at. I guess if you've... So I think that's what this is, isn't it? Because you're saying the business has hit... There's some reason to change.
Yes.
Otherwise, everything was going swimmingly and amazingly, and there's got to be a reason to change to begin with.
But imagine that this could be a bit more opportunistic. That only a select few that are writing this strategy can see, and they're using this document to alter business strategy or vision. So it almost depends what you're looking to achieve by writing this strategy.
But I mean, I guess for me, people can...
The tech shouldn't ever drive the business.
Exactly, it's like, why on earth would you...
Yeah,
well, you should never be just... Like, you need to know what the business goals are.
Yeah, 100%.
Otherwise, you've got no idea whether your strategy has actually brought any value
100%.
to the company or not. Otherwise, it's just random. It's like, I've decided that this is a really good idea in isolation, and I think we should do it. It's like, fine, well, when it costs X, did we get Y or not? I mean, if you don't know what Y is or what X was and you've got no interest in it, then you've just cost the business loads of disruption and money for no real legitimate value add.
100%, but there's, what we've kind of just talked about, like getting tech to push a vision. It might be that the business wants to achieve certain goals, but they don't know that they can actually achieve way more, or achieve it in a different way that gives them greater value by using cloud, and that could be part of the vision of the cloud that's included in the cloud strategy.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it should be included in the cloud strategy, but I think they should know, not necessarily about what it looks like in the end, but they need to know, well, we want to get the share price up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not their job to then know actually what that means.
Yeah, true.
It's like they just know that there's a big goal, very high level, superficial.
Yes.
You're then entrusting maybe the CEO or others in that business to have the vision of how that will be recognised.
Yes.
And then they might just like, right, okay, well, we need to get into a new market, or we need to do this other thing. Then somebody needs to go and be like, well, if we're going to do that, then we need to be really innovative, and we're not.
Yeah.
So, right, we need to obviously look at new services that we could consume. How fast are we normally moving in terms of innovation? Well, we released one new product and it took us 2 years. Okay,
that's the metric that we're going to use.
Exactly, that's the metric we're going to use. That's not good enough.
Yeah.
What do our competitors do? Well, they've done 2 product lines in 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So that's what we've got to beat, because they
do 3 months.
Exactly. And then you start to orientate yourself on like what this document needs to probably contain.
Yeah.
But without any of that data or information or questioning, then you're a bit blind on
why you're doing it.
Yeah, on where you end up.
Totally.
You're just in the now, maybe, in some basic reason to go to the cloud, and not necessarily a legit big enough reason.
Alright, so you've got the vision, you've got metrics that you're trying to improve for the business, you've got a reason that you're doing all of this, obviously that feeds into the metrics and the vision. What's next?
Sorry, I think you're confusing this topic a little bit, because this is something you're very excited and passionate about. That's how we entered this podcast, Jay. This podcast based on you being really excited about this cloud strategy. Exactly, you even whooped yourself into the equation. So yeah, you tell me, Jay, what comes next?
If you let me finish, that was going to be a rhetorical question.
Oh, rhetorical, right.
So
is that how podcasts work?
Classic Jon Shanks.
That's how podcasts work. You just ask rhetorical questions and sit in silence.
Yeah, I'm doing a podcast of one person from now on. These two people podcasts.
Yeah, they're overrated, these 2 people podcasts. You just ask myself the questions.
100%. 100%. So you've got the vision, you've got the key metrics that you're trying to improve. Now you've got to think about what it means to the business. So understanding where the business currently is, and that might be from an organisational perspective, how it's set up. It might be from a skills perspective, which will obviously overlaps to some degree with how the organisation is already set up, and then what the change will be. So if I'm going to put my techie hat on for a second. Whenever you're making like a change to a system, you always kind of map out so that you can visually represent where you are now, like an architecture, let's call it, where you are now and where you want to get to.
Current state and end state.
Current state and end state, exactly that. And so I'd say the next part of this document is probably that. What is your current state? What's your end state? Have you done the thinking around the organisational design to create that end state? Is that end state just going to be about the team that's responsible for cloud? Is it going to be wider in terms of how potential product teams or application teams are going to iterate on services on the cloud? What's the kind of scope of this? Again, feeds into what you're using it for, right? So if you're using this as a bit of a business case to get investment in this thing, then and those investment areas are building those product teams, then you absolutely need to include it. But if it's just to get your investment for, say, your cloud team, then maybe not. So it has to have a steel thread all the way through this document, and consistency. So what we're obviously doing today is just telling you about the different options, because you can't just like write a generic cloud strategy that covers every organisation and how what their goals are and what they're trying to do.
I guess so. The end states, there is doing things well, and those end states probably like by industry definition,
Oh yeah.
are kind of clearly defined, I would say. I mean, I don't know, it's a bit
Can you dig into that a little bit deeper? What do you
well,
think is clearly defined?
if you're using best practices and you're looking at kind of industry principles and you're talking about, there's values in, say, things that we discussed before, like the DORA metrics, like deployment frequency and lead time for change and all those other things, and security and...
What's the metric for that again?
Well, there isn't one for security under DORA, but obviously, awareness and visibility. Do people patch quickly? What's the patch frequency that you're operating at? So you can kind of probably tie it to the release frequency, but then include like, did you patch in that release? Do you often, because I think there's obviously metrics there that you could also surface additionally, but outside of those things, from true business value that isn't security business value, kind of take that out of scope a little bit. Obviously important. If you're thinking, well, there are a bunch of cloud services, they're finite, right? And so there's only so many of them that exist, and there's only so many that you might want to use that fit into the strategy of what you do as a company. So then it's about the speed of accessibility, the speed of use of those services, the speed of features, the growth of you in relation then downstream of all that technical stuff, which then is all about development speed, and then I guess then your strategy needs to somehow work out the delta between how those things are going to be realised, and what the strategy is a little bit for that. But that's a part of cloud and maybe also other things. It might not just be the cloud at that point, because you might need more than what the cloud gives you to achieve that outcome, because the cloud is just a bag of services.
Tools, yeah, exactly.
It's not necessarily bringing it all together into something. So, there is, even in the cloud strategy, there seems like it could be made up of more than just one thing in the end. Is this document to define the recognition of the true outcome that you're aiming? Because it said that if you're going for the end state, that end state might be more than just the cloud. If you, in the end, in truth, what you might need.
What do you mean by? So I guess, like in this conversation, we're talking about cloud being, not just like say public cloud or whatever, but also being the responsibility. There's some sort of responsibility in the organisation, and having that maybe as a central function. So we're talking about people, process and technology, right? Not just the technology.
Yeah, but you're talking about cloud technology.
Yeah.
So what about technology that isn't the cloud? Is that in this too?
Oh, I see what you mean. So kind of other services that you might use.
Other services you might use, other tools you might use.
Integrate with or whatever.
Exactly.
Kind of ways of working. I guess depends on how you're using them. So let's say a good example is Jira. It will, so maybe not quite, but you have ways of working, agile ways of working, whatever, and Jira
is that in this document?
Depends on, again, what you're using the document for. I'd say it fits somewhere else.
Okay, so you might want to link off to it online.
Yeah, because you can't just have like, a 200-page document that no one's going to read, that you've spent forever creating.
Jay, I've read your document, honestly, the old No, I agree. I'm just teasing it. I'm being slightly facetious, I suppose, in the question, because I agree with you on, like, it's just when you phrase things like that about current state, end states, things like that, that's quite a nebulous thing, right? Because it's like the end state could be way bigger in truth. To get the true value, it might be a lot more than just the cloud in isolation,
but
and
I guess
ways of working and
the end state,
agile and all the things you were saying.
The end state to some degree is, what what mixture of SaaS, PaaS and IaaS services that you're working with in the end. And in my example of say Jira, if you're targeting the end state of going further up that chain, i.e. SaaS products, then they're probably going to be born in the cloud or whatever, but at least you're defining your principles that you're aiming for in that target. You don't have to have everything defined, but at least you have ways of understanding how you're getting that value out of those things. So it could absolutely have a definition of how you're going to use those cloud services, whether you're going to prioritize, say, using SaaS Jira versus Jira within your own premises, because there's a cost to that in your business.
Yeah, because there's an assumption here. There's a few assumptions here that seem to be like really implicit in this doc that I'm picking up on. It feels like it's angled mentally in some ways towards like you're already kind of on-prem with something, we can kind of get you in the cloud, it might be some operational efficiency. Now, actually, you can make the cloud really bad too.
Yeah.
So you can't say, we're going to use some PaaS services and these services, and this is the thing, and our strategy is the cloud. And it's like, yeah, that could be done exceptionally bad, slow you down still, and you'd be worse off.
Yeah.
And if your aim was speed and cost savings, you could be slower and more expensive. That's highly probable, right? Because unless you know strategically how you are going to do it, not just what, because it feels like some of this is very what and not how, and the how is about how you're going to work, how it's all going to come together.
Yeah.
It feels like quite an important thing to not have somewhere, because without the how, it could be all wrong.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not be of value in the end at all. So, yeah, it feels quite an important. It is a bigger. This document could end up huge. That's what I'm saying. So it's.
But because it's at the beginning, so you'd have.
But by principles, you meant like we're going to do DevOps, Agile, blah blah
Yes,
blah. You mean more
exactly.
like that?
Yeah.
These things we're not going to get into the detail of.
Exactly.
But these are the things
these
that
are
we'll
these
do.
are the assumptions. We're assuming that an organisation either has buy-in or can point off to other documents that describe these things. Like, let's just keep it really lightweight as much as possible, because you don't want to define the world, right? But you probably have principles.
That's what you mean by the principle.
Yeah, exactly. Ways of working, principles that the organisation is adopting. Or
Platform engineering, maybe.
Yeah, potentially platform engineering. And therefore, the cloud strategy is there to support or further.
Yeah.
And those principles might also be, which layer of the stack that you're targeting, like I kind of mentioned.
Yeah, that makes sense. So keep it light touch. Like, we're going to be cloud native.
Yeah.
Quick definition of what that is. More reading over there.
Yeah.
We're going to be agile. Quick definition.
I thought you were going to do the quick definition. I was like,
quick definition of what it is. I just got to give an example. I'm
Yeah.
more reading over there, but more like that's what the doc would end up looking
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
rather than like War and Peace.
Yes.
I'm trying to define exactly how it's going to look in the end.
And remember, hopefully, that this is a living document. So what you start off with won't be, what you have
What
in
you
a
end up
year's
with.
time. Whatever, like what you start off with might just be a single cloud strategy. What you end up with might be a multi-cloud strategy that has then assumed, because you've now embedded all of those practices, you probably don't need to link off to them, right? So it depends, again, what you're using it for, who the stakeholders are, what the situation is, blah blah blah. And then that kind of leads us into the next point, which is how are you going to iterate on this strategy? Are you going to create it, like spend all of this upfront time and effort, a whole year program, 2-year program on building this platform or something like that? Or are you going to weave that in, like you probably should, with some business outcomes and value that you can drive early? So maybe like a cloud adoption roadmap. Hey, I have projects, API, some microservice thing over here that is being built to kind of to the benefit of this other business strategy that we're aiming for. This is how we're going to show the value of the cloud really quickly, because they're going to be our first user.
Yeah.
And these are the minimum things that we need to do on this like cloud strategy or this cloud platform to meet their requirements.
So would you be choosing because if the business goal was, say, like new markets, and if there was an existing thing, does that prove anything to do with the business goal? You see what I mean? Like, yeah, okay, you've taken something that existed, some microservices, and you went to the cloud. You're proving out the cloud at that point, but not necessarily the strategy. Because the strategy was trying to align to business value, which would be like, we are going to use these services that are innovative, and we are going to get to market, and we are going to start releasing new functionality. So do you start and bite that off straight away, like, well, let's get cracking with that, and that's the thing we should be focused on because that's the true value? Or do you then go off and be like, well, we'll get to that later, what we're really going to do now is prove out the cloud?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's how much are you being risk adverse versus being super ambitious in just like nailing the vision as soon as possible. That's kind of like the risk tolerance of the thing, right? So
let's do it, Jay. Let's just do it. Let's be ambitious.
But knowing how some of these organisations work, they're not just going to give you, oh yeah, here's like 10 million quid or whatever. It's probably going to be here's tranches of funding. So you probably need to like show something, some little value before they can like fully rely on you for this business. For this.
I agree with. I don't necessarily always agree with that approach, that risk aversion approach, because if you're a business owner, you want to yield, right? You want yield. You want something to be returned.
Not to yield. You want yield.
You want yield. Yeah. That's it. So to not have any yield in the end for things that people are trying to prove doesn't tell me that we're actually on the right path at all.
Yeah.
So I would argue that you kind of have to be ambitious, because if you did get those products out and you did make more revenue, definitely the rest of the stuff is easily moving.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've already shown value to the company like that. To try and just squeeze value, little drips of something, here and there, and like we're just going to go on a transformation journey, and anything. If I was a business owner, I'd be thinking, okay, great, like we're going to go on this journey, but when do we actually make money? In truth, like when are we going to get to the things we said we were going to get to? And that'll always be this friction between then, the business and technology at that point.
That's so interesting, because I think that's kind of you might kind of see that as almost whether you're changing an organisation, and you have that sort of adoption strategy. You're maybe creating all of these new roles and upskilling people into those roles, or you're basically creating a new organisation, a new operating model, a new organisation. Let's call it like most of the government has.
Is it not? Is that what this doc is supposed to be? Right? It's a strategy, is it not?
Yeah, I know, but it's not. It's like there's two different ways that you can achieve that strategy.
But it needs to align to what the business wants.
Yes.
Right.
And how quickly it wants it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and how much money it wants to spend on achieving it.
Exactly.
And what the opportunity cost.
So
is
really, it's about qualifying enough.
Yeah.
To define enough that you know what your strategy is aiming for.
Yeah.
So again, I think like there's a lot to tease out. There's so much to tease out up front.
Absolutely.
Before you can even really go off and write it, because I think unless you are absolutely crystal clear what you're going to be measured on in the end.
Yeah.
The strategy, if it didn't prove anything to the business properly, and it's cost a lot, because I think this is the thing. The expectations are a bit misled. You've got a business, you've defined these things, you know what's important to you. People are going off and defining strategies, and you might misinterpret that, alright, okay, so we're going to start with a few services, that's good, but then we'll get to the thing. And then you're like, no, this is like a whole transformation. And later on it realizes, no, this is a whole transformation. It's 5 years before you're going to see any real true value.
But that first piece of business value, right, that you're driving towards, might be that first, it like that aligns fully to the business strategy. So you don't just big bang land being in a new region. You might deliver one service in the region that you're targeting.
No, but I'm talking
quickly.
about the.
That's all I'm talking about. The adoption roadmap to deliver value incrementally rather than big bang.
I know, I agree. Sorry, I'm thinking now about the expectation on people on this strategy.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes sense. If your strategy was going into it thinking, right, well, we're going to phase it, there's a lot of change here, we need to bring people only to trade, and that's what your strategy is based on.
Yeah.
That is not fast. to yield much return, right, for the business.
Yeah.
It brings you all on a journey. You definitely get somewhere in the end. But if their expectation wasn't that,
yes,
right, because we had the chat and we were like, yeah, we need to be innovative, you know, we need to beat our competition and all this other stuff, then that could be years before you're going to get to that.
Yeah.
And they might not realise that at all. And so there is total misalignment on the strategy to the business again. And so then they're like getting confused on when are we seeing the thing. And to be fair, that's probably the most common thing you watch happen.
True. It's
right?
a transformation program.
It's a massive program that's going to take forever, and the business
forever.
didn't think it was going to take forever, really.
No.
And they also didn't suggest it should take forever.
Minimise technology in what it means to a business to fully adopt it, versus just thinking that they can get some outcome because they're using it, and not thinking,
because it might be options. Then you might need to give options in the strategy,
like whether you're going to partner, use outside kind of organisations, whether you're doing
like you're doing, like actually ring fence, leave the old.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take and go bang. Let's go brand new. Let's go brand new. Let's just get going.
Yes,
that's going to be far quicker. Option one, far faster. You return, but you've now got debt and a cost.
Yeah.
That does have something has to happen with that too. You can't ignore it, but it feels like there's a lot of options to probably discover before you can work out what to do exactly, what you're exactly going to aim for. Which is why it's a really complicated. That's why when you said the subject at the beginning, I was like, this is a complicated subject, really, and it is complicated. I think
that's why we're talking about it.
It is what we're talking about.
I mean, if it was simple, then I
think we're done with this topic. It's too complicated. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
It's too hard.
But I think the bits that are simpler, probably maybe. I mean, it's a bit of a ignorant. There could be slight ignorance to what I'm saying here, but is the technology is just the technology in the end of the day, and actually working with things that are defined already, that are in the industry, that are specific things, and patterns, and like talk about agile, it's like a known quantifiable thing that exists in the industry. There are services that you can use that are quantifiable in how you can use them. So I think downstream, actually in the end, the bit when you get into the technical detail is slightly, in some ways, can be different set of problems, but slightly easier maybe if you've got the good technical know-how.
Honestly, I think we sometimes we minimise them because we're technologists. So to us, obviously, they're super easy.
That's what I'm saying. It's maybe a bit of an ignorant and naive thing for me to say, because I'm assuming you do have people that do know how to make technology work for your business. That's a massive assumption I'm making there. The hard bit is really trying to pin down the magnitude of the change to the business.
Anything that deals with process and people.
Yeah, that's the hardest. Hard. That's the hardest bit.
People are hard.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah,
it's difficult. That bit becomes very, very difficult and challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
And the cost overall of not bringing people along versus bringing people along, and the speed, which is cost and time, and versus like,
and even in that the utopian world that we talked about, where you're leaving the old alone and you're just building a new thing, then you've still got to potentially like recruit a bunch of people, and the skills that are in like high demand in the market. So there is a lot of complexity in it all. So much complexity. Their responsibilities, how are they going to get like gel with the rest of the organisation that they clearly need things from? It's not simple, but overall the kind of outcome to the business and the value that it drives can be so high if it's done well.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think though the problem I have with strategies in this sense is they are they're humanistic in the end.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you get to obviously the humanistic side, is expectation and communication is the most critical thing.
Yeah.
Because if your strategy doesn't help set expectations properly, if it didn't contain any options, you didn't present anybody with any options, all these things means, what happens when the expectation wasn't met correctly, or you assumed they understood what you understood, and all these things that can happen. You're in a bit of a world of pain at that point, because people might want to pull the plug on the funding, right? And you're like, but we've got so far, what are you talking about? Look at the value. But like, their expectation wasn't that. Do you know what I mean? It was set incorrectly by accident. You
Yeah,
thought you'd said
like-
it right, but you didn't.
Like, let's just move some of these services because it costs less,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Well, we've done that now, so that's it
it's
then.
done. Yeah.
Achieved.
Yeah.
Cloud,
Yeah.
Tick. Done, tick
Yeah.
the box. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, that's not really what I actually meant. And
No.
that, and it's very, that's what I'm saying, it has to really get everybody fully aligned.
Yeah.
And the measurements have to be so well and clearly marked.
Yeah.
And timeline really and time bound. Like, by this time, I think we should see X happen.
Yes.
Right? This value should be there, affiliate with a timeline.
People also need to be bought into, I guess, the wider vision, right? So you've got right. By this, this is the value that we're gonna strive for. But what if that isn't ambitious enough?
Yeah.
So that value that you're striving for is like, oh shit, that costs
£4.50.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? It just costs.
Savings
It
or
costs
something.
so